G'day guys, welcome to lesson 2.2 on the Batman utility belt project. What we're working on today is the Gotham project. So hopefully right now you've completed your splash page, you've completed this Comic Sans project, and you're ready to start on the Gotham one. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that project right now. You should be able to see that from FRM Gotham, there's nothing on the page. I haven't set anything up aside from the utility belt, which we calculated last time. So if I double click on the utility belt, it does have the form code that sends me back to the original Batman splash page. Okay, so I'm going to close the Batman one because I don't need that open. I'm also going to give you a heads up that you do need to have a picture of a spherical object to go into this program. There is quite a few things that you'll have to create for it. Not many, but you will have to get them ready. So just a heads up that you will need a picture box and you will need some fields as well. Okay, so when you've got your picture ready, when you've got your form ready, you want to start by creating a much more smaller and simpler form setup. So as always, it doesn't need to be exactly the same as mine. I'm going to create something, it doesn't even need to be that big in fact, I might get it a little bit smaller. Okay, just have your utility belt in the bottom and then the rest of it should be fine for you. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to pin my toolbox so that I can grab all my objects, and I'm going to go to the all Windows forms again. The first thing I want is a label. So I want to have the little instruction that goes to the user. I'm going to click on my label. I'll pin my properties as well while I'm building my form. Okay, so text, this is what you need to have. So we're going to have the ability to type in any number into a field and then press enter or tab to calculate the remaining two values. Okay, I can see that's also got there. I don't want that to be the case. I want it to be a bit smaller than that. Oops, I've got type pick as well. I'll fix that in a second. We want to change the size of that label. So under auto size, instead of having true, we want that to be false so that I can now click and open up, create my label as neatly as I needed to. All right, now let's go through and fix up that typo. Type, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger as well so we can read it easier. Let's go with 12 point, and I might even turn the bold on as well. Okay, type in any number into a field. Oh, and now that I've done that, I can see my terrible typing skills there too. So type in, I'm just going to open that up so I can see it a bit better. Type in any number into a field and then press enter or tab to calculate the remaining two values. That seems to be all of them good. Okay, so there's our instructions. Okay, after that, now we want to do is have 3 labels, 3 text boxes, and 1 picture box. Okay, so we're going to have a picture box that has our sphere. We're going to have a label to say radius, surface area, and volume, and a text box to have our results or our values of radius, surface area, and volume. So I'm going to drag on my picture box first. I'm going to add that value. Add the picture itself. I'm going to choose my image. As I said, you do need to have a picture prepared. I'm just going to show you what mine looks like now. It's a simple sphere icon. Press open, just a sphere with a radius picture. Okay, you can choose whatever spherical picture you like. I might even zoom it to fit it into that field. Okay, and we'll press OK. I'll make it a little bit bigger so it looks a bit nicer. Cool. All right, now, as I said, we're going to add on a label. Okay, let's give this a name as LBL radius and give it the text value of radius. I'm going to copy these got 3 of them. Instead of radius, obviously we want to have surface area, and we're going to rename it LBL surface area. And the third one, it will be named LBL volume. LBL. And the text should read volume. Now in between all these, I might make it slightly bigger, it's getting a bit cramped now. Okay, in between all these we want to have a text box so that our value appears in all of these fields. Okay, I'm not going to have any text in there, but I do need to name it, so I'm going to call it TXT radius. I'll copy that one, and that can be TXT surface area. And a third and final one, TXT volume. Okay, and I'll just finish naming the rest of these. So this was a picture box. I'm going to call it Pic Sphere. And my instructions at the top are going to be called LBL instructions. Okay, so just recapping, here's our interface. We've got LBL instructions, we've got Pic Sphere, we've got LBL radius, TXT radius, LBL surface area, TXT surface area, LBL volume, TXT volume, and BTN utility belt. Okay, when you've got all those objects completed and nicely organized, that's when we can start working on it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start creating some variables, and we're going to set a default position for our cursor. So anytime I load this project, I want the cursor to instantly appear here in the radius field. Okay, now that actually is not done in the radius text box itself, it's actually part of the form load. So the easiest thing to do in this situation is to start by simply double clicking on an empty area of the form so that you get the form load code generated for you. You can see FRM Gotham _ load. Okay, and as I said, all we want to do is make it so that the focus of the cursor is into that radius text box. Okay, so simply put, TXT radius dot focus open shut brackets to indicate the module. All right, I'm going to unpin my toolbox and my solution explorer right now. Okay, this is my window still just there. I'm now obviously just in the code. Okay, you can see I've got my libraries are there. I'll just minimize those. Okay, I've got my Batman utility belt namespace. I'm now on the form Gotham. I have my BTN utility belt code created already as well. And I've just done the first code, which is to send the focus. Okay, send the cursor to the radius text box. Now that allows the user to open that form and start typing into at least one of the fields straight away. Cool. All right, so let's go back now. I beg your pardon, we're not going to go back now. We're actually going to start by creating some global variables. Okay, so up until this point, we've only used local variables. Local variables occur inside a specific module. So for instance, here in this Gotham load one, if I wanted to create an integer, I could create it here inside FRM Gotham load. Now that or if I call it index, it doesn't matter what it's called. Okay, but this program here, or this void function BTN utility belt, has no access to this index. Okay, doesn't know what it's called, doesn't know where it is, doesn't know what its value is, nothing. And the reason it can't do that is because it is inside the module private void FRM Gotham. Okay, so I could actually also create another variable called index and put it in here, and the two of them would never clash because they'd never be able to see each other. Now the difference is, in this situation, when you've got a global variable, you want these modules to be able to see that same one. So hopefully what you're thinking is, well, if I put it outside, okay, outside these values, can they see them now? Okay, and that is the case. Okay, so this index value is now accessible by this module and accessible by this module. Okay, every module I create as well is also going to be able to see this index variable. That's called a global one. It's going to be something that I can see and use across the whole project. rather than unique inside just a specific module. Okay, so I'm going to scroll right up the top. The general convention is that if you are creating a global variable, you do it up the top of the code so that you have that sense in your head that if there's code written at the top, that's a global code, it can appeal to everything underneath it. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got 3 global variables. I'm going to create one that's a double data type. I'm going to call it pi, and I'm going to set it to be equal to math.pi. Okay, whoops, not semicolon there. All right, so I've got double.pi and math.pi. All right, now math.pi, if I use that in my code later on as just math.pi, it would have actually worked, but it's much easier to just have a variable called pi. The next one we're going to do is we're going to call a variable called n, okay, and we don't have to have any value assigned to it, and you'll see later on why that's the case. Finally, we're going to have a Boolean variable that I'm going to call isNumeric. Okay, notice the syntax of what I've got there is numeric with a capital N. It basically means I'm going to create a variable that's going to return a value as either true or false if a variable is a number or not. Okay, so if it was testing the word, FRM Gotham, it would yield false. If it was testing the value 3, it should yield true. Okay, and that's going to become important later on because we want the assignment for, we want the code for all of the radius, volume, and surface area to first check that the user has entered in a numerical value before we try to do a code on it. Okay, so basically we want to enter a number into that and have the surface area and volume figured out. Or if I put it into the surface area, I want the radius and the volume figured out, and so forth. Okay, and in order to do that, obviously it needs to be a number first before we can do that. Okay, so we're going to create a sort of a cheat first right now. As you can see from the instruction, it says type in any number into a field and then press enter or tab to calculate the remaining 2 values. So you'll notice that there's no button there that says like calculate or solve. Essentially what we want to happen is if I click in the radius field and I type in a number and then I just click into a different field, then automatically the program populates the data for me. It does all the calculation and it automatically puts the correct answer into surface area and volume. Okay, so it's really helpful. We're trying to make it so that the user doesn't have to do as much work anymore. Okay, so how are we doing that? Well, we've actually got to create some of our own modules this time. Okay, so this is what we want to have. Basically, I want to make it so that if I'm on my txt radius field, when I put in a key, I want it to actually solve it for me. Okay, so I'm going to double click on my radius field and I've got txt radius text changed. Okay, now that's the one that's defaulted, that's the one that comes up all the time, but that's not the one I want to use in this situation. Okay, so if I actually backspace that section now, you'll see that when I go with underscore, I've actually got to have something else written there. And what I want to have in this situation is this keyword, key down, okay, with a capital K and a capital D. And instead of object sender, I want to have key event arguments E. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically, it means that when the user has chosen a specific button to inside that field, I want you to do this particular task. Okay, so if they typed in 25 and then typed in the letter P, and we had a specific function just assigned to the letter P, this is when that code would activate, so long as we had the actual letter P being the one that it's referred to. Now in this situation, the specific characters we're looking for are the enter key and the tab keys, because if we want the user to type in enter or tab to get to the next field, okay, we want to ask if that's the key that was chosen. Okay, so this is how we want to do that. So we want to have did the user press enter or tab, okay, and this is our syntax. All right, if the event key code, key code is equal to, okay, and I'm going to have 2 possibles in this situation. All right, I want to have either they entered in enter before they entered in tab. Cool. So if they did that, if the key that was entered while the user was in that field is either enter or tab, I want to move the focus from the radius to the next field. So in this situation, I've got txt surface area dot focus. Okay. So now what I want to do is duplicate that feature so that it occurs for the surface area field and it occurs for the volume field. So it might be easier to go back and forth between them and change the key event tags and all that stuff. But what's probably the fastest is to copy that whole block of code, okay, repaste it, and change it so that instead of being txt radius, it's txt surface area. And instead of being txt surface area, it's txt volume. So if I'm in the surface area field and I push enter or tab, now I go to the volume. And finally, you can do it for a third time so that if we're in the volume field, it now returns our value or our cursor back up to the radius field. Okay, and that's the automatic shift so that you can move back and forth between them. And that now all does is if I push tab, it will just simply move between these two different fields, one after the other. Okay, the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to start coding what happens when you leave the field. Okay, so basically if I just click on play now and I load up my project, hopefully what you'll be able to see is that the fields will be able to be tabbed between them. Oh, we do have a code error, hang on. What's my error? Oh, okay, I've left off one library routine, I think. If I scroll back up for you. What am I missing? There's one library field somewhere. Collections, generic, threading tasks. Okay, so you can see my error at the bottom. I might just bring it back up again, so because right now my picture is in front of that. I've forgotten that there's some other step that I needed to include, so I do apologize for that. All right, so what we can see here is that it says FRM Gotham does not contain a definition for TXT radius text changed. Okay, basically, because we double clicked on it before and it said TXT radius text changed, it automatically created some code behind the scenes. Now this is also your first time that you're going to be seeing what's called the designer view. Basically the stuff that goes on behind the scenes when you create things individually is stuff that we shouldn't really ever touch, but occasionally you do need to modify a couple of things. So I'm going to go back to this form, and what you probably see is I've got an error now. Okay, I can't see my form window anymore. Okay, and that's okay. Okay, it's not an issue right now because it gives me the options to try to fix it and resolve the problem. Okay, so what I'm just going to point out before I click on that is under my Solution Explorer, okay, you can see that I've got FRM Gotham, I've got frmgotha.resx and frmgotham.designer.cs. Now, up until this point, all we've done is bother clicking on this. Now, all of these other forms also have the designer and the resx forms as well. Okay, now we never usually use the designer. Okay, and that's because it's not something we need to worry about too much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through how to correct this error. Okay, because it's not actually an error, it's an oversight on my part. We've just forgotten to include one little thing. That's an important step. So basically, when I created my TXT volume text changed event handle, so if you remember when I double clicked on it and said text changed, okay, it created some code behind the scenes. Now, when I re-edited this to be key down, it didn't remove that text changed code, okay? And what it also didn't do was it didn't create my key down for me either. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my error screen and I'm going to click on this problem that says the instances, or this is where the error occurs, and it's going to take me to my designer view that I've got open over here. Okay, so what you can see is now it's identifying where the error is for me. Okay, but it's also worth pointing out and having a look at all the code that is automatically built for you behind the scenes. So for example, here's the LBL instructions object. Okay, you can see that the LBL instructions refers to all these different properties that it predefines for you. Okay, and these are just things that we changed in the properties menu. So this thing over here, when we were building the object, for the pick sphere, it created all these different property settings. For the LBL radius, it created all these different property settings. And as we scroll down, you'll see that it's got settings for the TXT radius field. Okay, and what we've got at this problem at the moment is we've got TXT radius.text changed, and it doesn't know what that problem is. Okay, because it doesn't know what text changed. It doesn't have a text changed event handle to point to. So it's saying, I've got an error, I don't know what's going on. Okay, now if you've got an error, one of the easiest things to do without deleting it is to comment out the problem. Okay, we don't actually need that to be the case anymore. Okay, so I've commented out the error right now, and when I click play, hopefully what it will do is it will not find any errors at this point, but we'll probably find that it's not actually going to work with our codes. So if we click on codes, when I click on 6, I push tab and enter, it's not actually showing me the right thing. Okay, and what should happen is when I click enter, it goes to my next field, but it's not doing that. Okay, and that's because we don't have the event handle in here. Okay, so what do we have to do to actually make that appear? Well, we actually have to have the event handle for each of these: TXT radius, TXT surface area, and TXT volume. Now we know what the event handle actually is because it's key down. Okay, all we have to do is add it into our forms. Okay, and add it into our designer. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll just pause for a second. So in order to be able to fix this, we need to actually get rid of this line. Now, being commented out is effectively getting rid of it anyway, but we don't really want to have something along the lines of this. So let's remove that whole line because it is creating a bit of a conflict if we ever do need to have a text change field. And this is the line that we need. So basically, instead of having TXT radius checks changed, we need to have TXT radius key down. Okay, and we've got this dot TXT radius and key down. You'll notice obviously that came up as a pop-up, and that's largely because we already had that there. Okay, and we're going to have plus equals. Okay, so we're going to be adding something to it, and we're going to create a new structure. So it says new system dot event handler. Okay, new system dot event handler. Oh, sorry, that's the next one. Sorry, a new system dot windows. Okay, dot forms dot key event handler. Okay, and that needs to be this dot txt radius. Oops, not dot, underscore key down. Okay, let's just get that one right. Did I just put something else wrong in there? And that's it. Cool, so we've got this dot txt radius key down plus equals new system dot windows dot forms dot key, or not key press event handler, key event handler, this dot txt radius underscore key down. Okay, so it's quite the mouthful on that one. Why have I got an error there? Oh, sorry, not underscore key down. Oops. No. We want to have dot key down. Okay, sorry about that. So let's just get that one right, written down correctly. We've got this dot txt radius dot key down plus equals a new class called system dot windows dot forms dot key event handler, this dot txt radius underscore key down. Okay, quite the mouthful, but please make sure you get it correct. Effectively, reminder, this is what it does. It makes sure that we've created the idea that a key down, pushing a key down onto the keyboard while you're in that field, is in itself creating a new event. Okay, so what else do we want? We need to have that appearing in the surface area and the volume, so that we've got the key down event happening in both of those. So we don't need to recreate it. I can copy it once again, put it into the surface area, but obviously instead of radius, it needs to be the surface area. And I'll do it onto the event handle as well. Okay, and then I want it to be in my TXT volume field as well. So instead of TXT radius, it says TXT volume. I'll move across, and I've got TXT volume. Okay, so now that I've got rid of those errors, okay, please make sure you've got them correct. Be very careful about what you've written. I'll click on play, and hopefully what I'll be able to do now is test that every time I move between those various fields, I can tab as well as push enter. So I push 5, I can push enter, and you can see it's now taking me between the various fields. Okay, so now that that's working, I'm going to give you a heads up that we're actually going to have another thing written here. Okay, I'm not going to put it in just yet, but basically there is going to be another event handle that we're going to have to create based on the next one, which is called the leave function. Okay, so now that those errors are gone as well, you can see that I've actually got back my form. Okay, the form has reappeared. It doesn't give me that designer view error anymore. Okay, so let's now go ahead and we're going to double click on my TXT radius text box again, and you'll see that it's because that text change was removed, it's actually now recreated it. And if I go back to the designer view, you'll see that it's actually back in here again somewhere. I might just close it for now. It'll probably show up again in a moment. Okay, so I've got TXT radius text changed. Now this time we don't want text changed again. We want a different event handle, and we've created the one that was based on the key down event. This time we're going to create one based on the leave event. So instead of TXT radius underscore text changed, it's going to say TXT radius underscore leave. And in this case, we don't actually change any of the parameters that occur here in that argument field. Okay, so every time I do TXT radius leave, now that means simply that the cursor is no longer in that field. So if it was in the text box and I push tab or I push enter or I get my mouse and I click somewhere else, the leave function is now going to be executed because the cursor is, or the focus is not on that text box anymore. Okay, so in a sense you could think that leave operates when focus is removed. Okay, so the first bit of code that we're going to do is we've firstly got to change any text that is entered into, oops, what have I done there? Any text that is entered into, it's given me that error now because I have got this TXT leave function. Okay, but I'll fix that later. Any text that is entered into the TXT radius field, we need to check that it's actually going to be a number. Okay, we need to check that that's going to be a number. So this is what I want to do. We want to create, we want to use the variable that I created up here before. So if you remember, I created a Boolean called isNumeric, okay, and I want to call that now. I want to start using that. So isNumeric is going to be equal to a test of what the data is in there. So this is what we're going to incorporate. We're going to call a double, and we're going to make it a try pass. Okay, now what that means is whatever's in the TXT radius field, I want you to try to pass it as a double. Okay, and if it works, I want you to store the result into that n field. Okay, which is, sorry, not out, not n, it needs to be out n. Okay, I want you to store the result into that n, which is also defined at the top as a double. Okay, so whatever we can figure out from what gets entered into that TXT radius field, I want you to try to pass it, okay, as a double, okay, and if it works, I want you to put it into the n, and I also want you to just say that it's going to be either true or false now. So isNumeric is going to give a result as either, yeah, I was able to do that, or no, I was not able to do that. Okay, so, I mean, if you want to comment, it's basically, is the data in the radius text box a number? Okay. All right, now what we're going to do is we are going to see that if that was the case. Okay, so if isNumeric, remember, if you have a Boolean variable as the condition, it means if the isNumeric, is that Boolean variable true? So if it is, we're going to create a double called radius, and we are going to convert that to a double. Hopefully why you remember that I'm using doubles, because we're likely to get values with things like pi. Oops, not TXT radius, sorry, just radius. We're likely to get things with values of pi that have decimal values. So if we're trying to use integers, it's going to give us some errors that we really don't want. Okay, sorry, that was the next one. TXT radius. And it needs to be the text value. Okay, so, not text. Auto convert for me. Cool. So I've got a value called radius, and I've got the whatever value is in the TXT radius value. I want it to be the double. Okay. Now, first thing I can do is, now that I have a value for the radius, I can calculate the surface area. So hopefully from maths, you guys are familiar with calculating that. Basically, we're going to do the formula. So the area is equal to 4 times pi times, now this is a bit weird because what you want to do is 4 pi r squared, but in the syntax of the C# coding, you have to use this function here called math.pow. Okay, so math.pow. Now what that does is, in these brackets, you need to have a value and you need to have comma followed by the power you want to increase it to. So in this situation, we want to have the radius because we want to have radius squared, and we want to raise it to the power of 2. Okay, so double area equals 4 times pi times math.pow bracket radius comma 2. All right, then once we've worked that out, once area has a value assigned to it, we simply just want to put that value into the surface area text field. Okay, so it's got surface area dot text equals, now you probably just want to write area, but area in this situation is a concept of a double number. So before we do that, you've got to do convert back to a string so that it can actually be included or be presented back to the user, because we can't print a concept, but they can print a string. Okay, so you've done area. The next thing we need to do is we need to calculate the volume. Okay, and we're very similar structures. We create a value called double volume. Okay, and we assign the volume formula. Again, hopefully from maths, you need to have what's it called, 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, which is a lot more complicated, but this is the easiest way to type it into your system. 4/3 math times math.pow radius to the power of 3 times pi, close brackets, divided by 3. Okay, I think I've got that. Oops, I've got the semicolon. I think I've got that syntax correct. Seems to be right. 4 times math.pow radius 3 times pi over 3. Yep, I'm sure we'll be able to test that a little bit later on. I got an extra bracket in there I didn't need. Yes, I did. There we go. Okay, and then obviously once we've worked it out, what our value is, we need to put the value into the text field after converting it to a string. Okay, so that's what our first one looks like. Now, obviously, you've got to do the same thing again, twice more, because I've given you the radius, and now it's worked out the surface area and the value. And the volume. Now, what happens if I give you the surface area? We want the system to calculate the radius and the volume. If I give you the volume, we want to calculate the radius and the surface area. So we've got to have pretty much the same concepts over and over again each time. All right, so this is where it can get a little bit more frustrating because we're just writing out some formulas, okay, but we'll do the best we can. Okay, now, as before, it would be easier to write txt surface area underscore text change and just change it to leave. But as I showed you, I can't get back to that because I created the error by removing the text changed. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix this problem, and I'm going to add in the fields, the event handles for the surface area and the volume at the same time now. So we'll go back to this. I'll click on my design view. You'll see that once again, I've got text change written there. It's the one I blocked out before, but then I recreated again. So it also recreated that code for me. I don't want it, so I'm going to delete it. Okay, you could just comment it out again, and it would do the same thing. Of course, it's a bit messy having code duplicated multiple times. Okay, so what's the new code event handle that we need to include? Well, we've got the key down events, okay, but now I want a leave event to be constructed. So here's what we look like. This dot txt radius dot leave plus equals new system dot windows dot, oops, not system dot windows, that's the first one again. System dot event handler, open brackets, this dot txt radius underscore leave, close brackets, semicolon. Okay, that one's a little bit shorter, thankfully. So it's txt radius plus equals new system event handler, this txt radius leave. And as I said before, once again, what we want to do is we want to create it, okay, for all of them. Okay, we want that to say surface area. And this one to say volume. Okay, so it's giving me an error at the moment. You might be able to guess that that means that's there simply because we haven't got those event handles in the project. Okay, so if I go back to my form, it's going to say something along the lines of, well, you don't have that project. What do you want to do now? You don't have that, that code. There's two ways you can fix this. One is we could go to my code and I could rewrite that and just change it to surface area leave again. Or I could double click on these, just comment them out for now, because I know I'm going to need them again in a moment, and I should be able to re-access them again. Okay, of course, if I now double click on that, it's going to create the txt text changed one, okay, which I don't want. All right, so one of the fastest way is to retype that, but I'm going to do it the easier way and just delete the other thing. So if I double click on surface area and I double click on volume, I've now got those text changed there. Okay, so I change text change to leave and text volume to leave as well. I'll go back and find that now I've got an error again. I can go to my design view. It will have added the text changed one. Okay, and so all I have to do is delete that. Okay, and unfortunately what I've forgotten is that because it wasn't being used, it's actually deleted the leave one. So I'm just going to have to add those again anyway. Whoops, I don't know how I just did that. There we go. So let's change that to volume. This one to surface area. And I've got my form back and I've got my leave functions working. Okay, so it does become a little bit problematic. As you can see when you move back and forth between the design view. The good news is for the rest of this project, there is no more in the design view. You are finished that, so you can close it. Okay, just make sure it's saved. And we'll be able to finish off now by just modifying some of these bits of code from the first one. So I've got txt radius leave. Okay, I am going to copy this code. I'm going to go into my txt surface area and I'm going to paste it. Now, obviously, if I've been given the surface area, I need to change quite a number of the fields. So instead of txt radius, I'm going to change that so it says the surface area now, and we need to change it so that instead of being radius, it's going to be an area variable. I want my radius to be what gets calculated first, and I'm going to delete that formula because I do not want that at all. Okay, calculate the, oh, I spelled surface wrong there before, so calculate the radius. The good news is once we've calculated the radius, the volume can then still be used because I'm just going to use the radius formula to work that one out. So I'm going to have to change this formula. Okay, so here's my new formula. So to work out the radius, we're going to use the square root function. So math.sqrt. Inside that field, we use area, and that's going to be divided by 4 times pi. Okay, so double radius equals math.square root area divided by 4 times pi. Okay. Next one, let's go down into our volume, and we're going to paste that whole, oh, not that one, sorry. I'm going to paste that whole block all over again. There we go. So there's my double radius. That needs to be double volume. That needs to be TXT volume. I cannot have the volume formula at all. That's not helpful to me, so I'm just going to delete that one. I'm going to scroll that down, fix that error as well, because my surface area is still correct. So all I'm going to have to do now is calculate the radius. So double radius equals math dot, now this is a really complicated formula to work out the radius from the volume. It's actually 3 times the volume divided by 4 times pi multiplied to the power of 1 over 3. So it's a really complicated formula, or multiplied by the power of 1 over 3 means take the cube root of something. Okay, so here we've got math dot power. I'm going to have 3 times the volume, and then I'm going to divide that by 4 times pi. Yep, so that's the stuff that I'm going to raise to a power. And in this situation, you're probably thinking, can I do raised to the power of 1 over 3? You should be right. Unfortunately, what we've got here is a new situation where we're converting something from an integer and a double. Okay, so this becomes a little bit more annoying. Now, it took a while to figure this one out. Raising something to the power of 1 over 3 is the same as doing the cube root, which is exactly what we want to do. However, in coding, if you raise a power to something, it will raise it to the power as an integer. So 1 divided by 3 as an integer is not 1/3, okay? It would actually be 0, okay? Because what happens is integers are whole numbers. So if I have the number 4.5, and I say, give me the integer value of 4.5, the answer would be 4. If I said, give me the integer value of 5.9, the answer would be 5. If I said, give me the rounded value of 5.9, it would say 6. But the integer value of 5.9 and 5.1 is both equal to 5. Okay, so the integer value of 1 over 3 is closest to 0. So we're actually now here raising it to 0. Now, in order to get around this, you have to use double values. Now I know I've got it written right there that it says double, but that's referring to this value here. In this situation, it's talking about integers because it's inside the math.power, because it can only raise to the power of integers. So in order to raise it to the power of 1/3, it needs to be raised to the power of a double divided by a value. Okay, and that will result as a double value being what the power is. So it's got raising to the power of 1.0 divided by 3. Okay, so I might just add in a little reminder for you. So we've got calculate the radius, and we need the double value to be calculated in the index field to avoid the integer overriding it to 0. Okay, so once we've got that radius finally sorted out, obviously we need to put it into the field. So we've got txt radius dot text equals convert to string, and it needs to be the radius. Okay, so finally that's what we've got. If I click on play now to test my code, hopefully what we'll be able to do is we're able to put in a value into one of those fields. The other two fields will become populated with the mathematical results based on those various formulas. Okay, so if I put in 5, it's calculated the surface area and the volume for me. If I put in 10 now into the surface area and I push tab to leave, it recalculated the other two. So I can put a value into any of these fields and it should hopefully recalculate them based on where I'm at each time. Okay, ideally as well, whoops, just put 7 in there. I can, just keep changing them over and over again. Okay, so notice the functions that you covered just then. Don't worry too much about all the designer view stuff. It is important to be able to understand how to fix an error for that. But here's a quick recap. We've got a couple of variables that we had created. We've got a focus that automatically starts in the radius. We've got key down events. So if the user entered an enter or a tab, it's going to change the focus. After that, if we then incorporated the leave event, so when something loses focus, it now executes all of this code because a leave is effectively the opposite of focus. Okay, now what it does is it asks first, is the data in that field numeric? If it's not, if it is, do all of this stuff. Okay, if it's not, I want you to add in another field now. We're going to add in a message box. Okay, so if I've got if is numeric, it's going to work it out for me. But if it's not, we're going to produce an error to the user and say you need to put in some correct data. Okay, so I've got txt radius, if is numeric, blah, 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 else, okay, and we want to have message box, dot show invalid entry. Please use numbers only. We'll put in a comma, and in this field, so the first message there, that's what appeals to the user on the front, and then this thing here, that's what appears in the title of the font. The next things you've got are what type of message box buttons you want to actually see. So in this situation, we're going to have message buttons.OK. So we want to have the OK button, and you can see that OK cancel or other things that you can do, and you can look at other things. But I also want to have a little icon in this situation. So message box icon, and I want to do the error icon. Okay, so I might just hit enter here so you can see that a bit easier. Okay. So we can see else message box.show invalid entry, please use numbers only. Error, which appears as a message box button with an OK button and a message box icon error. So if I just copy that fragment of code, I'll scroll down a little bit more so it appears as the else after the surface area field, and it appears as an else. Oh, I've actually forgotten that whole if condition there. Congratulations to those people that figured that one out. I'll just put that else in, and I will close that. And we'll do if is numeric. And I'll add on that line up the top too. So I didn't actually do the test on the volume one. Apologies for that, but that should be there now. So it's got if is numeric in the volume field, then show me that it's numeric, close it off, it's else, otherwise show me the error. So we'll click play, we'll test one more time before we finish. Gotham, oops, 5. Still working it out for me. However, if I now put in something different, You can see my error has appeared. You can see invalid entry, please use number only. There's the title of my error. I could write whatever I want there really. And there's my icon and my OK button. Okay, and it won't go away if I keep putting in incorrect data. Okay, even if I put in 8.5, it should be able to handle that for me. Okay, so I'll stop that now. Please work on that project now. It does take a while to get through these. It will take you a little while to get through all of the various content. I'll just go through one last time. You can see doubles, you can see booleans, you can see the button, you can see TXT radius in the form load, key down events, key down events, changing the focus. You can see leave events, as well as various formulas. Be careful with your brackets when you do those. I've got an if condition that results in an error if it's not yielded as true, and that repeats for all of them. And I got that for volume, surface area, and for radius. Okay, so thanks guys. Make sure you've worked on it. Complete that task as well as you can, and enjoy. Thank you.